In 1955, a group of brave South Africans gathered in Kliptown, Soweto. They came from all walks of life: workers, students, farmers, and the unemployed, united by a dream. Out of that historic moment came the Freedom Charter, and right at the top was a bold declaration.
The people shall govern. And for us, this is what democracy meant.
"70 years later, September 2025, that declaration is the foundation of our democracy. We have the vote. We have a world-renowned constitution. We have multi-party elections. That goal was reached. But if we step away from the paper and onto the streets, does it feel like all govern? Or does it feel like the promise of Kliptown echoes in a void, drowned out by the noise of our modern struggles? Today, in the state we're in, we ask the difficult question: has the dream of all shall govern been deferred? Stand with me in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. Before us rises the Constitutional Court. Its walls built on the rubble of an old prison. Once a place of confinement, now a monument to freedom. You can almost feel history pressing through the bricks, chains turned into promises. The law declares all shall govern, and here on paper, that promise has been fulfilled. Every citizen over 18 has the right to vote. The apartheid state did not give away to another tyranny, but to a multi-party democracy, guided by one of the most admired constitutions in the world. And this system has been tested. Think back to 2024. For the first time, the ANC lost its majority. The country held its breath. Would chaos follow? Would the dream unravel? Instead, there were tense weeks of negotiation, deals struck, and coalitions born. And through it all, the Constitution held. That is democratic maturity. That is proof that power lies not with the rulers, but with the people's collective voice.
Without votes, you lack power. And so the first precondition of giving people the power to make their lives better is to give them the vote and to give them some means of participating in the political system.
Our courts rule against the powerful. Our press, relentless, exposes corruption. These are the pillars of a state where truly all can govern. But step outside the court, walk the streets of Johannesburg, and you'll meet a second reality. One not written in law books, but carved into the daily grind. Here, governance feels less like a right and more like a lottery. Turn the tap, nothing. Flip the switch, darkness. In this city, water and power arrive like uninvited guests. Sometimes here, sometimes not. The council chambers echo with political squabbles, while residents wait in line for tankers under the blazing sun.
A daily reality for this community as Johannesburg water crisis worsens. Taps here run dry daily and the desperation is visible.
The situation is very bad. I don't know what to say just because it's close to 2 months now without water, normal water. Now they are opening the water at around 11, 12 while people are sleeping. They close it around 6 or 5 or 6. What does it mean? We have to wake up around 4 o'clock wake up all the children, all the family, just to get bath. What is happening in our government?
To be here with no title, with no office powers, and with no powers at all. I am just a mere resident and a person that stands here to be the voice to the voiceless. So we got Masondo here, and I asked for him to bring his commissioner before he leaves. So now his commissioner is here, and now we're going to keep him accountable to get Chobokot. And I want to ask him a question. Are we animals? That the mayor, the MMC, and the MEC cannot walk the soil of this ground. But when it comes to voting,
to understand what the people shall govern means today, we want to hear from a generation that is shaping South Africa's future. We are speaking to Thoriso Mogoru, a student who cast his vote in the 2024 national elections, one of millions of young South Africans whose voices are critical to our democracy. Hi, Thoriso. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great, and how are you?
I'm also good, thank you. So I know that you voted in the 2024 national elections, right? Was it your first time?
Yes, that was my first time actually voting.
Okay, how did it feel walking into that voting booth?
I felt like, I felt nice. I felt like quite heard because that was my first time. I was also like, I was sick and tired of like the voices that everyone out there is crying about. I was like, hey, let me just have a say in my government so that going forward there can be less voices that are crying out there.
What motivated you to do that? Was it like a sense of duty? Was it frustration? Or was it like hope for change?
It was hope for change and frustration. Because we wake up, we're in a country where everyone is crying, like literally. Everyone is crying. So it was frustration at the because like we come from people come from backgrounds where there's no water, no electricity. It's things we see like, and as far as like government on its own, like how things are regulated, how services delivered to people, it's bad. So I was frustrated and I was like, I had hope, so that's why I waited there. I was like, nah, my voting will have a say in this government.
So as a young voter, because today we're speaking about the first principle on the Freedom Charter, the people shall govern. So what does this phrase mean to you as a young person in South Africa?
I think the people shall govern, it's a phrase that says that people will have a say in building their economy, people will have a say in parliament, people like will have access to voting.
Okay, and do you feel like that is happening in any way? Do you feel like as a young person you are governing in any way?
So like it's a thing of even if you have something to say, but where, like I'm not given a platform. The only platform that I'm given to say it's through voting. And as I said, or like if you're voting for a party that has their frameworks and ground rules. So you are just saying I'm agreeing with those things. Like for now instance, if I want to come up with a project that maybe would bring about employment, sustainable, like if I've researched where do I go, I don't know where to go. So I don't think we have that much of a say.
As a young person, do you think that voting is enough, or should young people, specifically young people, be doing more through like protests, activism, or even like social media campaigns?
I think on that, voting alone is not enough, because I think maybe there are certain ways that the government and we need to do something to make the government listen. Because sometimes you vote, they say they're gonna do this, they don't. Like for instance, if let's say for instance right now we have an issue with the police and things like that, we can have like petitions, forums, strikes. I think there's another way. Those are other ways that the government could hear people actually, as opposed to voting alone. Because voting happens every 5 years. So what happens in the midst of 5 years? A lot of things happen every day. In 365 times 5, it's a lot of days. So there are a lot of things that could happen there. We know that you can't solve every problem. That's one thing we know as people. But how do you minimize? Like, I would rather be happy with a government that satisfies 90% of the people. And as time goes on, we're going to work on the 10%. So rather than while 80% is crying. So I would rather behave with a government that satisfies 90%, and while 10% is crying, as time goes on, they also fix on that, they'll work on helping the 10%, as opposed to a government whereby 80% of people is crying. Yeah, there's something wrong there.
This is the reality that makes the promise feel hollow. You cannot feel you govern when you have no power over your most basic needs. When billions vanish into corruption scandals, while you wait for a bucket of water, the social contract doesn't just strain, it snaps. For millions, the lived experience is not empowerment, but abandonment. This powerlessness, this is the second reality.
Joining me today is Professor Daryl Glaser, an expert on South African politics and democracy. So, Prof, the principle hasn't been without its challenges. Some argue that corruption, inequality, and the elite capture of the state mean that the people don't really govern in practice. How would you respond to this?
Well, look, I mean, one thing I would say is that this is not a uniquely South African problem. I would say probably since the global economic crash of 2008, to some degree before then, but that was really a turning point. There has been a disillusionment amongst electorates around the world with their governments. And there's been a lot of swinging between one political party and another, and a lot of discontent. So South Africa is part of that process. Fundamentally, the problem is that if the state was delivering more in terms of economic growth, inclusive economic growth, with something like full employment, then I think people would tolerate some of the limitations of the political system. But I think for some people, democracy is simply a way of making decisions and choosing decision makers. But other people, there are other people who think it also involves some sort of delivery of socioeconomic rights and material goods to people. And people who define democracy in that more extended way, in terms of what it actually delivers, a lot of them will be feeling very disillusioned about democracy because South Africa has not been able to deliver what the mass of the people wanted.
So how do these two realities, the promise in law and the reality on the ground, exist in the same city, the same country? They collide every day. Here is one coalition. The protest itself is born of failure. Taps that run dry, streets left in darkness. Proof of the second reality. And yet, the right to march, to chant, to demand without fear, that is the first reality alive and breathing. That protest is a perfect example. It represents the failure of the state to provide a basic service, proof of the second reality. But the right to gather and protest, to demand accountability without fear of being silenced, is a right guaranteed by the very constitution of the first reality.
One thing I'll say is we shouldn't underestimate the importance of the vote. Perhaps especially a younger generation of people who weren't involved in the struggle for the vote or who don't remember life before they had the vote, they underestimate its importance, symbolically and practically. So I don't think that what we're living in today is like apartheid. I'm not saying things have got better in every respect, but we're not living under apartheid. And that was a necessary step to get rid of apartheid and to create some sort of inclusive democratic system. But obviously there's just a lot more to be done in order to make that system work in a more robust way.
The 2024 election was another collision point. The system worked, a triumph of our democracy. But the result, A verdict of deep dissatisfaction with the ruling party was driven by the failures of governance on the ground.
The problem of declining turnout in South Africa, it's most acute amongst the youth, but it's not confined to the youth. It's actually something that you see in the black population as a whole.
Yeah, true.
And I mean, interestingly, it's not really serving the interests of black people in one level, at one obvious level, that actually, I think the evidence from the last election was that whites turned out in larger numbers and blacks stayed away from the polls. So it actually gave whites power out of proportion to their numbers. So I think from that point of view, black people would be better served by turning out to vote, because the vote still matters. You know, it's going to be very difficult for one party to get a majority of seats now, because it's very unusual in democracies around the world for one party to get more than 50% of the vote. The ANC used to get it, but it was very unusual in that respect. And I think those days are over now. So I think coalition government is simply going to be a necessity, and we're going to have to work out how to do it. Part of the problem is that you've got, parties in the current coalition that have a very different histories and ideologies at many levels. And also with these very small parties and one-person parties, then you get a lot of opportunists coming into the picture, and it becomes quite messy. And the ANC is going to be the largest party for some time to come, and it's going to have to decide whether to ally with the sort of black populist left, or whether to go with a more broad coalition of different groups on the center and right. So there are going to be all sorts of interesting choices that the ruling party is going to be confronted with. But I don't know whether coalition governments are going to work, but we're going to have to try and make them work. So, I think we've got a problem that is partly about the quality of the politicians, but partly also, South Africa's in a deep economic rut. And so our room for error is very limited. And when you've got bad politicians and you've got structural problems with the economy, it's a bad combination. And it disillusions a lot of people. But, I think on the one side, protests and some of the social media commentary, it's a good way of making clear your discontent and your demands. But it's not really, in the end, a way of participating in government. And that perhaps is its limitation.
And, Prof, today we see protests, we see student activism. I mean, here at home, adverts, at the beginning of every year, we see students protesting every single year. But we also see activism on social media. In some ways, these can be read as demands for deeper realization of the people shall govern. Do you think these forms of activism continue the spirit of Freedom Charter?
Well, yes, it's necessary to come back to the point that democracy is not simply about voting, and it can take many forms. It also involves, a healthy democracy has an active civil society. It has NGOs, it has community movements, it has social and political movements campaigning for various causes and interests. And of course, now in the age of social media, the terrain on which that can play out has been extended. And obviously, a lot of young people are more au fait and comfortable with that sort of terrain of social media than they are with conventional politics. And politicians take notice of what goes on social media.
So perhaps all shall govern isn't a destination we have or haven't reached. Perhaps it's the struggle itself. It's the constant, messy, and often painful push and pull between our constitutional ideals and our lived reality.
And Prof, finally, looking to the future, what more do you think is needed to fully realize this principle?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, because a lot of the time in South Africa we say on paper things look pretty good. So we've got a parliament, and a parliament that's meant to consult the people. You've got an active civil society, more active than in a lot of other countries, certainly in the global south. So you've got quite a lot of the ingredients of a democracy. You've also got a fairly progressive constitutional court. You've got the human rights institutions. So on paper, it all looks good. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what follows from the fact that, the electorate has begun to punish the ANC for underperformance. Will that make a positive difference? That's something we need to see. At the moment, unfortunately, it has mainly resulted in the instability of coalition government. But it's still early days for coalition government. I mean, that's supposed to be how democracy works, through accountability and through punishment of underperforming parties. And we're just in the beginning of seeing whether that mechanism is going to operate or not.
The power isn't just in the vote. It's in the court challenge, the community meetings, the investigative report, and yes, even the protest. You've been listening to All Shall Govern, an episode of the We Should Be Writing podcast. This podcast is a product of the Honours in Journalism and Media Studies program at the Wits Centre for Journalism in Johannesburg. Our show was produced, edited, and hosted by Nthabiseng Baloyi and Abena Mahlahlane. Our theme music was composed by Stoic, Sabela by Thandizulu, and Siwelele Mama by Hugh Masikela. Our graphic design was by Abena Mahlahlane and Nthabiseng Baloyi. Additional episode music credits and info are available in our show notes. On all social media, we are at Witsvuvuzela, and you can see more of our work on witsvuvuzela.com.